Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you're listening to this. I'm Clinton,
And I'm Hillary.
and welcome to Black Atlantic. We're a primarily Black Atlantic-centric podcast, website, and media channel with the goal of bringing East Coast POC voices to the world.
You can expect to hear from us every week with guests, segments, panels, roundtables, exploring topics from all over Atlantic Canada.
So be sure to visit our website at blackatlantic.ca.
And also follow Black Atlantic on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and more.
Amazing. And a special piece of news from today's episode, really interesting. We actually shout out to the people at CHMA, a radio station broadcasting out of Sackville University, Mount Allison University. And in fact, one of only 3 independent radio stations in all of Canada. So they've picked up our podcast. We're going to be playing every Sunday night at 8 p.m. You can check them out online at chmafm.com, or if you happen to live in the Sackville area, 106.9 FM. We're pretty happy about that. How are you this week, Hillary?
A mixed emotion week, but I'm gonna say good because it can never be bad. Good things that happened this week. I got to speak at the Women of New Brunswick coffee break segment that they have because of you. Actually, somebody reached out to me, Amber from Amber Events. So she reached out to me for me to speak at the French version of the coffee break that they hold, but I also went to the English one earlier in the day. It was really exciting. Got to see a lot of people, some BIPOC faces, some white faces, all sorts of female New Brunswick faces. And it was really cool to be a part of it, especially recognizing some of the businesses. So that was really exciting. Today, I posted on our website a poem, which I have not done poetry since graduating university, 7 years ago. So that was interesting. It's about the inner monologue of a Black woman in the Toronto streets and all of the different things that you have to think about when you're trying to be safe, but also trying not to be perceived as Black, but also trying to get home. So a very raw inner monologue. I got a flying squirrel jumpsuit in the mail from a Canadian company, and it's like a bit, when you put it on, it's a onesie, and it makes you look like a flying squirrel. And the whole point is that it is completely size inclusive. So you only get small, medium, large for basically wrist sizing and your neckline. The middle size is supposed to sort of be like a muumuu. And 20 minutes before this, they saw my video and they're mailing me another one, which is so exciting because that is the good thing about social media. You support someone's business and sometimes they mail you goodies, but at least they appreciate the support. So the company is Bedell. They are a Vancouver-based clothing company. So I try to support Canada fashion as much as I can. So that is super exciting. And then my only bad news is that it's not bad news that I'm going home next week. Surprise. If you're listening to this on Sunday, I'm going to be home on Tuesday, but I can't see my mom because someone in her unit at the nursing home has COVID. Womp womp. But I get to see you. Yay. And that's been my week.
Yay. I'm looking forward to seeing you. We all are. So that is exciting.
Yeah. And how has your week been?
My week's been okay. It's been good. I stay pretty busy with the same things every week, so I don't want to bore people with any of that. But if anyone can tell, we have higher speed internet finally at home in my rural area that I'm living in. So you're going to be able to see a lot more coming from me a lot quicker, getting things done, editing, production. Literally, I was on some slow ass internet, clicking buttons and just sitting there and waiting for pages to load, like I was a kid again. So we got that taken care of. That's really cool. Looking forward to the weekend. It's been months since I've hung out with some of my boys. We don't get together very often, so I'll be going out with them. In the past couple of years, I'm still friends with all my original friends, but I've formed a group of friends who have come from, the West Coast and then Toronto and Ontario. So we're all going out. We're probably going to hit a couple places, end up at Cassie Lounge in Moncton. Shout out to Isaac. And there was one other thing. I just wrapped up my last interview for CBC Black History Month, a local New Brunswick artist that's going to be airing. Well, I can tell people on the podcast, an artist named 180, who became the first Black artist in New Brunswick history to ever win any award with Music NB. So that is a record broken for him. Congratulations. And met with CHMA today, checked out the facilities, got an amazing setup there. We're going to be recording some live episodes next week. So that's going to be a whole other vibe. And I think that's it. We've got, I think we've got a contributor coming on in the next little while as well. Hillary and I met with Nisola this morning to help out with the new venture, Black Clinic. So
that was a really exciting call.
Yeah. She's I don't know if she'll ever be, if she wants to be, if you'll ever hear her or not, but she's quite funny.
You have no idea.
And very talented.
I am very passionately like, please come on the show and tell all of your funny stories. But so excited to see what else we can do and what more can come of this, especially with this partnership radio wise as well. So a lot of like really cool things are happening for us right now.
Yeah, fun week.
So pumped and humbled.
Amazing. So let's get into some shit, because we try to keep things very Atlantic Canada as much as we can, but this is going to be a New Brunswick episode.
Yep.
Provided by the passions of Hillary and some things that she's pissed about, and I'm on board with, for sure.
Well, I'm not necessarily pissed about this one. This is going to lead to something that I'm pissed about. Yeah. So let's start with, I will read a Facebook post from the grand city of Moncton. And I shouldn't have said grand because it isn't about Greater Moncton. It is about just Moncton proper. But as of the official 2021 census, the population of Moncton has grown by 10.5% since 2016. The Moncton's population as of 2021 is now 79,470 people. And they say, not only are we one of the best places to live in the country, we are also one of the fastest growing. Okay, so I read that. Yes, I read that. And my initial thought was one of bitterness. Just in terms of feeling that I feel like that number has probably grown significantly due to immigration. And I do feel that those people are not properly represented or fairly treated. And that's sort of what I initially said to you, which led to a private discussion on the phone that we thought we should bring here.
Yeah, exactly. Moncton's population has skyrocketed in line with New Brunswick's population. A big reason for this is New Brunswick realized years ago that they were failing. The powers that be and the people who've been in charge, did a really bad job of managing this economy and education and health system. It's no secret that New Brunswick is the poorest economy in all of Canada, which yes, still makes us richer than over 90% of the world. But for a country as prosperous as Canada, we're in last place for education and for our economic status. So basically, New Brunswick was failing, and they realized the only way to solve this problem was to bring in immigration. They needed to bring in new people with new money, and you would think new ideas, but not exactly the case, because when they get here, they're not treated like equal. They're not treated like regular citizens. They're not given the same opportunities as other people. They're not told in advance all the time that their degrees, their medical degrees, their professional degrees, their doctorates, their lawyer degrees, engineering degrees, they're likely are not able to use those when they get here. So you have engineers coming over here that end up working in a fast food joint to support their family because they were promised like the land of milk and honey. And that's not the case at all. Not only that I support immigration, not for those reasons. I just love to see more diversity in New Brunswick. I love to see more cultures and people coming here. But, it does hurt the global economy in general when you pluck the best of the best from these other countries and convince them to come to New Brunswick, taking those countries, sometimes smartest and brightest people, hurting them over there, bringing them over here, and then oppressing them further. So the population growth is definitely bittersweet for that reason, but that's not the only reason for population growth, right? Just like I said, over the past years, I've met a number of people from across Canada. New Brunswick has had an exodus of Canadians coming here from all over the country. In fact, I believe 5,000 Canadians moved to New Brunswick last year alone. Oh, are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was mostly
I
done. I'll
no,
add one thing, I guess.
it was still good. I heard you say about the 5,000 and you just stopped like right after that.
Did I? I mean, I was mostly done. I was going to say what we talked about on the phone as well. I hope that the multitude of multicultural Canadians moving to New Brunswick eventually does something to help the newcomers and immigrants that come here from other places. Because, you know, if you try to dick around multicultural Canadians who have been in Canada for 1, 2, 3 generations, you know, it's not white privilege, but it's certainly Canadian privilege. Like, you can't treat a person of color from another place, from Toronto, the same way as you can treat a person who left everything they knew behind, moved here with their family, may or may not know the English very well, may or may not know how things work or know their rights. You know, you can't treat a, a multicultural third generation Canadian from Toronto the same way as you can maybe oppress and abuse immigrants. So I see totally why you feel it's a bittersweet situation. And yeah,
there's that. And so a lot of what you said reminded me about, we had once had a conversation with Claire Kelly about immigration and how they cherry pick the top people and they have this point system, and like you were saying, how those people often don't even know. And what's funny now, and it could be an Ontario specific conversation, but they are starting to have conversations now about, we are so desperate for healthcare providers that they are like sort of allowing and figuring out a way to test nurses and doctors who are coming from abroad who have technically the skills of their country. And finally, they're doing the work to figure out if they are qualified here, because COVID has put us in such a precarious place that we need that. And it's, again, one of those things that it's like, it is a shame that it took a pandemic for you to validate the education of people who are just coming from a different place, and that you were just too lazy to put those systems to effect and in work. And you're doing it now that like the white man is sick. Like, that's fully how I see it. I think it's really sad that it took this much, because those people should have been working as soon as they got here. They shouldn't have been oppressed or lumped into these stereotypical jobs of like cab drivers or Uber drivers or whatever, if they had the skills to better the healthcare infrastructure from the start.
Totally. Yeah. Lazy or intolerant, or lazy or old boys club and racist, and just really not wanting to share the wealth. Bridging is what New Brunswick needs. Like, we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, yet you're bringing doctors here and telling them they can't be doctors. I'm not saying that every country is going to have a program that is up to par with Canada. They may not even have the same medical equipment, or maybe they do, but it's time to create the proper bridges so that wherever people are coming from in other places in the world, they can do whatever bridge courses necessary to bring them up to speed with Canadian standards, and then become an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor, especially in this province, because this is where we need it the most.
Which sort of brings us, if you're ready for our next topic, because they segue perfectly.
I'm totally ready for it. Yeah, so they do. So we have, with the multiculturalism flooding into New Brunswick, who is the person responsible for all these people, for all these people's well-being?
My BFF, Mandrew Marmol. I feel bad. I have everything against Blaine Higgs, nothing against Mandrew. She is just trying to do her job. And in an article on CBC,
for listeners listening, we're not knocking the person, we're knocking the role. Go ahead.
Yes. And so in an article for CBC, she sort of admitted that this might be an impossible feat if they really do want to cap it at 1 year of having a commissioner for systemic racism. So in this article that was released on the 23rd, she says that through her 30 private consultations so far, the two most common issues are an inability to find work and the overt racism that children are experiencing at schools. She then mentioned that she met with like council people in Moncton and was going to do a partnership with them to do consultations at their city level, spoke to the city of St. John and mentioned that she was entering in that partnership and recommended that St. John allow her to do the same. And then for St. John counselors, she said she hoped to wrap up submissions by the end of May, which would give her staff time to prepare a final report that would be submitted for the end of her tenure, I guess, as commissioner for systemic racism in October. So even she's a little bit like, through all of this, I mean, offering more services and then basically saying that she doesn't know how to continue after October if they really put a stop to her role there. So yeah,
I kind of found the article really weird, to be honest with you. There's so much going on in it.
Yes.
So Manju is responsible for dealing with multiple racialized groups, not just Black people, not just Indigenous people, but I don't know the specific. Did the article say 7 groups? No, 7 cities, municipalities, but she's basically dealing with, Asian cultures, South American cultures, all the cultures. So a hard job, probably. I was surprised to hear that she only sat down with 30 consultations. Now, I don't know if those were with 30 organizations, 30 individuals, 30 municipalities. It's a lot, but at the same time, it seems like there should be so much more that she could be sitting down with. She's saying she doesn't have enough time. They want to wrap up by May so they can do the report in October. In some ways, it feels like maybe she's plugging for like a permanent job or an extension of the contract, which wouldn't be a horrible thing, but I found that funny in the article. And I don't think the word has been put out there enough to racialized people of how they can get in touch with the Systemic Racism Commissioner's department to voice their concerns, to tell their stories, to share their complaints. We talked about it on a previous show. We gave the website, we gave the link and the information. And when you start talking, I'll quickly try to pull that up again for any listeners who maybe have horrific stories of racism to share. From a systemic point, I can see how she's saying maybe the biggest challenges are finding work and children experiencing racism, because racism on the street isn't necessarily systemic. But the article had a lot going on, and I'd like to hear more about your thoughts on it and just in summary.
Well, I'll clarify some points as well, that like, yeah, she does say that she spoke to 30, and if I believe we've brought it up before, and I forget if it's on here or not, but she did, when we were speaking about the racism in PEI, and when she recommended that they have a commissioner, she outright said that she was not taking complaints, that their commissioner, if they hired one, should. But she was very much like, I don't have the time for personal like reports of racism complaints. And to your point that you were just saying, she says in this article, I'm working with one university, one community college, one municipality, because it's really a matter of time. We've been given 1 year to fulfill this mandate in 7 different departments and several different racialized groups, including our Indigenous community. So that's not, I don't know. The feelings that I have about this entire thing are still very skewed. I think just because I feel like we both know that Blaine Higgs never cared about it. And so I feel that all of the work that Manju is doing, even if she is like rushing or maybe cutting corners or selecting certain things to focus on to get this report done in October, what's going to happen when she hands it over to the Conservative government? I feel like nothing. And so what is the point anyway? That's sort of my feeling. Like you're trying to figure out all of the areas in which there is systemic racism in terms of housing and all of this stuff to hand over recommendations, but will these recommendations even be done? And if the most that happens is that she is, sort of pining for a more permanent position, I think that would be a good thing. I feel like she could do more good if she was a permanent fixture.
Max, what are your thoughts on this? Can you get your cat on the mic?
Sure. Do you dislike racism? Yes, because he is a black and white cat. My word. Yeah, if she was to have a permanent position, I don't think that would be the worst thing. I would like to see what she's actually capable of, given like the proper measures and timing and everything, like with this full support of the government, not what I perceive to be shambles on a podcast.
PR stunt. A PR
Yeah,
stunt. Yeah,
exactly. So that's my take on it. But I appreciate the honesty of, this is what I'm doing because I've got only this much time.
Yeah, I think for us, it's just the unknowing, because for so many episodes and so many weeks when we've discussed this, we're just like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? Like, let us know. For anyone who wants to learn more about the Commissioner on Systemic Racism, just type it into Google, Systemic Racism Commissioner New Brunswick. It'll bring you right to the GNB site, where you can contact them if you want to give your own thoughts on racism or things that you've dealt with in New Brunswick. I'm going to share this page on our channels, and to anyone listening who wants to write them directly, it's ea.junior.kalala, KALALA @gmail.com. Hit them up, let them know your thoughts, get them doing their job.
Yeah, that's one of the staff members who works for her. I saw her staff was at one of the many Black History Month panels that have happened so far. And I was, unlike how I felt when I saw Blaine at that one panel, I was happy to see she brought her Black staff to the panel. That was nice.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, it is our personal opinions that, Blaine doesn't really care about the outcome, did this for PR results, but maybe the next person in power will pick up this report and do something with it, or maybe Manju will get a more permanent position, and this can be an inspiration. I like to be optimistic sometimes. This will be an inspiration that could spread across Canada, and other provinces will eventually pick up their own Commissioner on Systemic Racism.
Yeah, it would be great if, PEI did take her recommendation and did it in a proper way, and, with like all of the collaboration and funding and support that their government could give, and, could help racism efforts there. And in all of the provinces, it would be fabulous. It would be fabulous if they, allowed Manju to do more work, because I do believe there is good intention there in Manju. Girl, I like you. I promise. I promise. I'm sorry.
It was a bit triggering for Hillary, to all of our listeners.
And to those who don't know, I
very
had
upset for a good 6 months. Yeah, you tell them what you went through. Yeah.
It was just every week waiting with bated breath to know when this person would be hired, and my own family saying move home and apply for the role. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this, but yeah, it was just a wild ride, hoping that some good would come of this. And like you referenced, we still don't know. And I think we've seen, and hopefully our listeners have as well, a lot of other independent research has gone into looking into if there is systemic racism, and it already has been proven. So a lot of our questions come from, we feel very aware of this situation and we know that it exists. So what is this report going to do or encourage the government to do? And that is where so much of the uncertainty lies, because we know the systems that we are experiencing racism from every single day. We know that they exist. We know that they're there. So you don't have to tell us that. Tell other people how to fix it. That's all we want.
Yeah, it's frustrating. They took a long time to even pick her for the position. I think they were 4 to 6 months late on that. And then, yeah, I mean, we knew that people of color had trouble finding jobs and that children experienced racism in school. We knew that. It's really a big distraction, and it's really been distracting us. Like, you didn't need a year to figure that one out, for sure. To confirm something all people of color know wholeheartedly, because we've all experienced it, and so have our children. And if they haven't yet, they will. And I'm so sorry to say that to parents out there, but I mean, try to be prepared for it and talk to your kids about it and get them prepared as well.
Maybe that's the one thing I found surprising about the article is like the job thing is unsurprising. And I think that mentioning that, kids are still facing overt racism in schools to us isn't shocking because we know of people going through it. We know direct examples, and we've also been those direct examples. I wonder if white people reading the CBC article think that teachers and schools have a better handle on it than they maybe did 10, 20 years ago, and are thinking that it's less of an issue. And maybe Manju saying that, like, no, this has not gone away at all. Maybe in her report, she can even elucidate how social media and things have perhaps made it worse. And then maybe that'll ruffle the right feathers in terms of the New Brunswick school districts and education minister. Because it is wild to me that I graduated from high school 10 years ago and I am still hearing about like really abhorrent behaviors from students, teachers who do not feel they are properly DEI trained, and a lack of resources from the school districts and like, so they don't know how to handle it as things like George Floyd's murder come into the social media sphere. These kids are learning about it live, and yet they don't feel they have the tools to properly work on that or inform kids about it. So maybe Manju mentioning it will do the right thing in that regard, regardless of her report.
You know what? That's a really good point. And I mean, let's hope so. Let's hope the people that she really needs to be talking to, the 96% of New Brunswickers who are not classified as visible minorities, learn something and get shocked and believe the things that visible minorities have been saying for decades when this report comes out. Let's keep our fingers crossed for that.
That's what I hope.
Yep.
So in
So what
other
else we got?
news, in more New Brunswick news, and this is another one that I'm passionate about, the friggin' mysterious illness taking New Brunswickers.
So let's explain to people who may possibly not have don't know what this is. Yeah, go ahead.
So there is the potential of a mysterious illness that has been affecting the lives of people in New Brunswick. And if I remember my research correctly, there's about 49 people who have weird ailments, young 20-year-old people with Alzheimer's like illnesses, muscle wasting, ataxia, loss of memory, loss of cognitive function. And for a very long time, there was no, and there still is no root cause. They can't figure out what's going on. As I mentioned before, I believe elsewhere, in the research findings, there was people from like the Mayo Clinic and John Hopkins hospitals and hospitals in the States that had interest in this illness in New Brunswick and wanted to participate in the research, had mentioned that things like this and doing research in this way was even how they did findings of like multiple sclerosis and stuff like that. And so it was really beneficial. And that's when the New Brunswick government stepped in and said, no, we are going to keep all of the medical research to only New Brunswick officials. We don't want any external help. We don't want even help from like Public Health Authority, Government of Canada. Everybody leave. Only New Brunswick people can be looking into this. And I mentioned then that was bizarre and it sounded like covering up something else. And how weird was it? And I also mentioned at the time that like my mother lost the ability to walk a year before being diagnosed with dementia. There are some things that personally to me smell the same, and I've been curious about it. And then today, Blaine Higgs's government decided to say, oh, there's no mystery illness. Y'all be tripping. Actually, it's like they want to basically say that it is Alzheimer's, it is Lewy body, that the few similarities with this illness that there are to these other illnesses is enough to tie it together that it could not be something else, which was fishy enough to me. And this is where it gets fun. That was announced at like noon. And then like 3.5-4 hours later, Blaine Higgs's government announced
Well, we're not getting into that yet. Are we gonna get into that after as the last topic?
We can get into that as the last topic.
But announce that thing. Go ahead.
Okay.
that should be the segue. That'll be the segue.
Okay.
Sound good?
Sure. So tell me how you feel about them saying it's not an illness or it's not real.
Well, it doesn't make sense. It is highly suspicious that when this mystery neurological illness popped up 1 or 2 years ago. They're making it seem like they came to the public with this, but I can't recall if it was leaked or not. But either way, when this came up, there were all sorts of speculation. The glyphosate that certain organized, huge conglomerate companies in New Brunswick are spraying on forests, things in water, things in the soil. There were all kinds of suspects of what could be causing this. People from around the world came to study it and offer their assistance, and were almost overnight shut out of these public health endeavors. I believe Dr. Alier Marrero was one of the neurologists who treated multiple patients and was doing research on it. And then again, almost overnight was asked to leave the province. This might not be verbatim, but and kicked out. And that, why would the New Brunswick government not want any outside help in investigating this matter that possibly, if true, points to one of the organizations that run the province? Why would they want to do that? There's got to be, what I was saying the other day is like, follow the money. Like, if there's something that doesn't add up, who benefits from the cover up of this story? And then conveniently, and it wasn't 48, actually doctors and other people within this field believe it may be as many as 150 people, 148 people have this mystery neurological illness. For them to come out today and say that, in the words of you, Hillary, y'all be tripping, makes no sense.
Y'all be tripping.
First of all, why did they bring this to the public a year ago without having properly researched it, filling New Brunswickers with all this fear for no reason until they knew more about it? And why, like, how irresponsible is that of them to have done that and then come back now and say it's nothing? It's probably not nothing. It's probably a crazy cover up, and it's just wild to me, the idea that all these people suffering, their families with undiagnosed neurological conditions, or simply conditions that are very commonly diagnosed, I believe, in many other parts of the world. How could they be writing it off to being this alone?
Yeah, I completely agree that it smells like there's definitely something else going on. I think it's really unfortunate that they would do this and just not take it seriously. But at the same time, at the minute that they started denying help from outsider sources, clearly something else was happening. And I feel like it's really unfortunate because, again, it's like it's playing with people's lives, and you don't know how many people are going to end up affected at the end, because we don't know what's making this weird illness happen that now they're passing off as other stuff. So like, who knows how far this could go, what it could lead to down the road. Not to be alarmist, but that's a similar, concern to how we all felt at the beginning of COVID. We didn't know what was happening with it. We didn't know where it came from. We didn't know what it could lead to. I would hate to think that like 10 years down the line, something scary could happen because of God knows who's spraying God knows what in the air on God knows which property because of all of this. So
yeah, and what they're leaving out in their reports today is the odd fact that many of the people in New Brunswick that had these disorders popping up were not of the typical age groups for which these disorders were coming. So they're actually ignoring data that points to this being more than what they're saying. I didn't see that anywhere in any of the reports I read, and there are a lot of people really upset about this. But these are like COVID. These are people, some of these people in their 20s, 30s, that are catching these whatever they are, mystery neurological illnesses that usually only people in their later years catch. So that doesn't add up. So they're explaining some of the cases and how they could be other things, but they're completely ignoring the deeper question of why are young people getting this? Why is there so many? Why are there so many? That's, I don't know. I don't have the stats. I don't think there's this many unexplained cases in concentrated areas for neurological illnesses that they have no explanation for. I'm really afraid this is going to get brushed under the rug and everyone's going to move on. And now would be a good time to segue. I'm really afraid they're already brushing it under the rug, because only hours after this report came out, to multiple people being very, 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 very upset about this, another juicy tidbit of news was dropped by the New Brunswick government, and something that is very distracting for very many New Brunswickers and will likely spark up a number of debates about this new piece of news while brushing everything else under the rug. Do you mind if I segue into this?
Go for it.
New Brunswick has announced today that almost to the date, 2 years after the initial closures took place in 2020, that they will be lifting all restrictions by March 14th. This is pretty big news for a lot of people. I know there are a lot of people sick of mandates, sick of masks, sick of restrictions, sick of not being able to go to restaurants, don't want their kids wearing masks in schools, and in queue with what many other governments are doing around the world and people in Canada are doing, also with the advice of the CDC. It looks like you're having a fight with your cat there.
I'm
Also
having a literal brawl with Maxwell.
It's very distracting. The people
I'm so
listening to the audio podcast, you're not getting what I'm seeing right now. We do post on YouTube weekly, but it is, yeah, really hard to keep focus with Hillary yelling at her cat. But anyways, almost 2 years to the date of it, they are lifting all mandates and all restrictions, and this is going to be a very distracting piece of information, a piece of news that people are going to be debating whether this was the right time or the wrong time, or if we are in the right phase or the wrong phase, or what's going to happen. Is this going to be a repeat of next year? So wild. What are your thoughts on this, Hillary?
Thought number one, now that if you're watching the video podcast, Maxwell's here. Thought number one is that announcing it 3 hours after disrupting like people's lives about this mystery illness, clearly on purpose, clearly a PR tactic. It feels very much, in my opinion, like you know, burst some people's bubbles and then you excite the rest of the population about the fact that, you know, freedom may finally ring in terms of mask mandates. Also being in Ontario, you know, there's a lot of feelings about giving credit to the convoy for the lifting of these mandates, and like, I don't think so. I really do think that we were at a very weird place where the mandates sort of weren't making sense, because you were telling everyone to get 3 needles, but then you still weren't letting them come to spaces together, knowing that they most likely wouldn't die if they were vaccinated and then hospitalized. So at certain points in certain places, the mandates did feel unnecessary. I will say and put a caveat that as having a mother who is immunocompromised and in a nursing home now next to somebody somewhere in that unit who has COVID, it is still very scary. I will probably continue to mask until I am able to see her, even when mandates lift here in Ontario before New Brunswick, just because it's still so risky for something that we do not still completely understand, something that is spreading quite quickly. And I do have a lot of sympathy for people who are older and immunocompromised who also want to go back to living their lives but must be completely petrified. There's also now rumors, and I hadn't really heard about this, but I have my best friend Saraya who educates me on these things, that there's COVID and then there's also like long COVID.
Yeah.
And there's rumors that appear to indicate that long COVID can also bring about Alzheimer's like symptoms. And so now the running joke is, which Alzheimer's will get me? The mystery illness one, the hereditary one, or the long COVID one? Because I could have all three, having been in New Brunswick. So my initial feelings are that it feels scary to be unmasked. I went to a bar this past weekend. I stayed sober, for those of you who know that I'm a sober person. And everyone was unmasked because everyone was triply vaxxed, screaming ABBA into each other's faces. And I was just like, is this normalcy? And it was scary because it was normal. And I was like, I'm going to end up getting sick. And it was in the back of my mind, but I kept screaming ABBA and pretending I was going to be fine. So it's all really weird. But the timing of the announcement is definitely rigged.
The timing of the announcement is likely rigged, and it's gonna probably work at brushing this under the rug once again. I gotta say, like, I did everything I was supposed to do for the past 2 years, and I'm sick of it too. I'm sick of wearing a mask, and that's not to say that when the mandates lift, I'm not going to wear a mask. It doesn't mean I'm going to be maskless everywhere I go. I'll have to decide if I want to wear a mask at work. I'll be cautious for weeks. But we are living in a different world than the honorable premier of our province when he lifted the mandates last August. We're in a different world now with a weaker variant of COVID, a much larger percentage of the population vaccinated, and herd immunity building really fast. I mean, it is playing out in the school. I remember a year ago, if we had 16 cases, the whole province was freaking out. Now no one checks anymore, and we're probably somewhere around 3,300 cases, I believe. COVID has affected over 10,500 children in the school systems in the past year alone. So it is a different scenario where, the mandates aren't really making sense. We have to normalize seeing people with masks and not making them feel weird about it. That should just be a thing of the future. If you feel uncomfortable, you should wear a mask. But to everyone else, when do we get back to normal? I'm kind of excited about this. I can't lie. I'm kind of excited about this. What was I going to say? It's just going to be an interesting thing to see play out. Oh, what I was going to say is you alluded to it and I was waiting to allude to it. What is going to be really frustrating for both you and I is if in a few weeks, the people from this freedom convoy start taking credit for something that anyone who even turned half an ear to the news knew was going to start happening in March or spring anyways. Before the convoy started, people in the Canadian government was saying, it's time we start to get back to the previous normal. It's time to start living in fear. We know more about COVID now. We know the cycles. We know the variants. We know that there's vaccines. It's time to get back to it. The CDC was even saying before the convoy started that by about March, they may downgrade COVID from a pandemic to an endemic, meaning it's going to be a virus that will always be with us. It's always going to be in the population. However, the variants likely will get weaker and weaker. People will still get sick, but not as sick. Hospitals won't be as overburdened. And, we could possibly start to getting back to normal life. So it's going to be really annoying when we will see the people from the Freedom Convoy take credit for something that anyone with like half a brain would have heard that this is something that was going to happen anyways. I'm not talking to the intelligence of the people in the convoy. I'm just saying if you heard even a couple news articles over the past few months, you knew this was the path we were going on. And this whole political campaign to take credit for it by running this convoy is, that's going to be a future topic. I can tell you that right now.
Well, I've already heard other people talking about the fact that people are trying to take credit, like, oh yeah, the convoy was successful. Look at the mandates lifting, or at least that was a lot of the sentiment when they started lifting in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And you said something else that I wanted to comment. Oh, my other concern is just, and maybe we will never get back there again, fingers crossed. But the other concern is everybody lifting the mandates at the same time, which is going to cost a mass amount of everybody going out and everyone traveling. And I just hope that there's a recognition that we need to donate or put money back into healthcare infrastructure, because now more than ever, all of those anti-vax people or people who are simply unvaccinated are, I feel like, now even more at risk once they are able to mingle with us, because we're spreading it and we're not getting sick and we're not getting hospitalized. And now all of these people are about to be reintroduced to restaurants and bars and movies and culture again. And then they're going to catch it and they're going to be the ones hospitalized, especially as we start to encourage more like loosened, restrictioned travel. And so that was my other big fear about trying to see my mom as quick as possible, because I'm like, what if we get back to a place where the numbers get so bad that they start to reintroduce mandates because they finally lifted them? But who knows? Who knows what will happen?
And I mean, that may happen. That's a very real reality. You can only predict the future of the COVID variant, but you can't know it for certain. We may get harsher variants in the interim in the next couple of years that make restrictions necessary again, or we may not. There's no way to know. But at the same time, I don't want to wear a mask forever. So, bit of an unpopular opinion from me last year is that not at the expense of, and this is before people started dying, I said this, not at the expense of people's lives, but at some point governments have to experiment to see what will happen if they loosen restrictions a bit, with the knowledge that if we have to go back to them, we do. The government let it get out of control last year here in New Brunswick, but they should have clamped down again much sooner, and they didn't, and that was unfortunate. But there's a concern in me, and there's also a giddiness to just the idea of seeing people's faces. I yeah, and I'm seeing the effects of the distraction directly in my own response to hearing the news. Like, it's more exciting for me to think about that than it is for me to get frustrated over this very real, what we see as probably a cover up regarding this mystery illness in New Brunswick. And who knows how that may affect people in the future as well. And what are they going to write it off to when and if it does? Certainly a very New Brunswick episode today.
A very New Brunswick
The
episode.
good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's about right. I do completely agree though, and it'll be weird to see how the lifting of mandates also plays out politically. Everyone was so mad at every politician for so long, and now that they're giving us what they want, will all of these, people who supported the convoy go back and still support the same provincial leaders that implemented the mandates in the first place because they align on everything else? It'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out. Like, will people go more extreme? Will people still sympathize with some of the conservative governments? Will people go more liberal? We might forget every transgression that happened once we're allowed to be naked faced in the breeze at restaurants doing whatever we want to do.
We should coin that phrase. I'm personally very excited to be naked faced all over this damn province, and maybe travel a bit too, to be honest with you. But I think that's a wrap for this week.
That's a wrap.
I mean, it's a very New Brunswick episode, and we are going to continue to focus on other provinces as well. But there was a lot of interesting news coming out this week, and as we get more contributors from other places, we can't wait to hear more and more hot topics from other provinces as well.
Yes.
Do you want to tell the people?
Tell people which thing.
Where they can find us.
Right. Yeah, I was like, tell them what. So you can find us again on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. I think that's it. We have a GoFundMe. If you would like to fund us, we would very much appreciate it so we can do more cool things, and encourage more work like the wonderful call we had today with Nasola, and having more contributors. The more voices we can amplify, the better we believe our work endeavor will be. So that's what your money would support if you did so.
Yep, you could find the GoFundMe on our blackatlantic.ca page. We've already got a couple contributions. Thank you so much. Really not for us. It's just for the work that we're trying to do here. Speaking of contributors, shout out to Savannah for Savannah's History Corner. She's been posting Black history facts all throughout the month, and we're very thankful about that. I know you're already listening to the podcast if you've gotten this far, but just make sure you follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and now on please leave a review. And now we're very thankful to have formed a partnership with CHMA FM over there at Mount Allison University in Sackville. So now you can listen to us without supporting a corporate entity. If you want to catch us on their channel every week, that's an independent radio station doing good things. Actually, I talked to the director today, and they're just really into doing good things through audio and radio, and even some stories of contributions and equipment they've sent to other countries to help people get radio stations set up and stuff like that.
Yep. And next week we'll have a guest. So we don't always just talk. Sometimes we have guests, and next week we'll have a guest.
All right. Well, from Clinton, Hillary, and Max.
My God.
The cats in the background.
I'm so sorry.
This has been another episode of Black Atlantic.
Oh, there he goes. That was his goodbye. Peace.